things coming up here at SyncTimes. We're going to use that polling feature throughout today to get feedback and also to elicit if there's anything that you specifically want us to reach out or connect with your team about as we talk. Then there's going to be some options to fill out some polls. You'll see a slide that says feedback, and then Ian will turn a poll on to solicit your feedback. So jumping right in, this is the agenda for these quarterly updates. So we're going to talk a little bit about the vision, what SyncTimes is and what we aim to do. Next, talk about the functionality that has been built and is available from this last quarter. Next, we'll talk about the roadmap, some of the things that are coming in the next quarter, and then some of the longer term things that we're planning on building over the course of the next year. So that's really the agenda. We plan on this taking about 45 minutes, and then hopefully we'll wrap up about 12:50 Mountain Time, give everybody time to get to our next meeting. And also towards the end, if there's any questions or requests, feel free to stay on or to submit those via polling or via the chat. So talking a little bit about our vision, we gave at our summit last year here in person, we did a little facelift on the product vision to kind of clarify what we're aiming to do. And that is really to understand and improve the patient and staff experience in our health centers. We help achieve that vision through four things. Exfoliate is not one of them: locating, communicating, and illuminating health center operations, as well as integrating with other systems. Those are the four things that we're going to talk about. This is what we've always had for locate, communicate, and illuminate. So locate, know where people are throughout the health center. Communicate, meaning communicate what's happening and what different patient needs are. Illuminating, meaning providing data to drive important operational decisions. And then we've just added integrate, which means we're integrating with other systems to help accomplish those goals. This is our agenda. We start with integrate. So we're going to talk about a couple new features on the integrate side. Then we'll go to communicate, locate, and illuminate. On the integration side, first, I want to just talk about the objectives, why we integrate, and some of the purposes of the integrations. The first being we want to reduce staff burden. A lot of times we are asking staff to manually track things that really are automatically tracked through the SyncTimes system. When we integrate, then we can start to reduce some of that manual tracking. Next, we want to increase the care team communication and coordination, help address care gaps, help improve quality. And then third, we want to optimize the utilization of other systems. So there's things that are in your EHR that maybe aren't used super consistently, and we can help update that data automatically. First, we're going to talk a little bit about a new feature related to registration timing. And so the time that patients have arrived at the health center before they're fully checked in is a time that there hasn't historically been a lot of data around. Most systems, EHRs, don't really have that time. What they do usually have is some statuses that you can change and a status that can automatically be sent when a patient starts the check-in process. So the goal here is to hopefully identify some opportunities for training and any workflow improvements that are needed. This is what that looks like in the SyncTimes system. So you'll see our normal blue, time with provider, green is time with staff, red is time the patient's alone in the exam room, yellow, time where the patient's waiting in the lobby. And then the additional status here is the checking in time. It's the salmon color. And so we're available. We can show this data now on your reporting to really include more of that door-to-door cycle time. The outcome here being that you get a better picture of that entire cycle time. And you also can drill in. If suddenly that check-in time skyrockets, then often there's just a workflow adjustment that needs to be made. To have this happen, if you're on Athena and through the marketplace have an API integration with SyncTimes, this is happening automatically. We're automatically pulling in the check-in time, the start time. If you're on an HL7 interface, then we need to coordinate with you and your EHR to include that status update to timestamp when the check-in is started and including that data. Next, we want to talk about functionality to write back into the EHR the status of an appointment. And so right now, staff are usually having to leave kind of the flow of the appointment and use anywhere from 5 to 10 or 15 clicks in order to update a status that says this patient's now with provider, this patient's ready for discharge, that type of information. The reporting based on these statuses generally is kind of a garbage in, garbage out problem. And those unnecessary clicks really add up for support staff and providers. So the solution here is we have now the functionality to write back in either through the Athena Health API or through an HL7 message to update the status of the appointment within your EHR. The outcome there being that it's a lot more consistent and automatic. When a provider walks into the room, then that status automatically is updated. When an icon to say that a patient's ready for a provider, as an example, is added on the SyncTimes tablets, then we can automatically overwrite that status to say now this patient is ready for a provider. Outcomes here being better data, better status updates, a little more consistency on the schedule, and obviously the staff experiences are improved. They aren't having to click around to do some of those things. Again, requirement here is going to be engaging with your EHR vendor to coordinate those statuses. Once again, on the Athena Health API, this is a live feature. And so if you're on Athena Health, this is already live in your organization. Third, as we've built out the EHR mapping and really more EHR integrations, we've identified a couple of challenges. The first is that initially we upload a set of data and quickly we get new resources, we get new appointment types that you guys add into your EHR, new staff, et cetera. And so that initial upload becomes outdated relatively quickly, is what we found. Often the people that are in charge of updating and maintaining those registers can be separate from the people administering the SyncTimes system. And so linking that data together, making sure we get the EHR ID, has been historically a little bit of a challenge. What we've built to help address that is an EHR mapping tab. What that shows is departments, provider resources, appointment types, appointment statuses, and it has an option there to either link or to map a status. So if you're linking it, you're saying that as an example, provider ID 3 is tied to this or is linked to this provider in the SyncTimes system. Or alternatively, department ID 1 is tied to department ID 1, a specific department in the SyncTimes system. There's also an option to exclude. So as an example, if there's an appointment type that you don't want to pull into the SyncTimes system, then from this dashboard, you can update the status of that appointment type and say, no, we're going to exclude. We aren't going to automatically import. In the past, this has been very code level on the SyncTimes side that our integration team has had to build these out manually. Now this is something that you can manually, that you can update on your dashboard for people that have requisite permissions. This is a separate permission, so users can be given the permission to access the EHR mapping tab. So next, we're going to jump forward to Communicate. This has been an exciting quarter for the Communicate build. We want to first talk about some of the challenges related to patient wait times in the lobby and how we're helping to address that. So often in the lobby, what we found is that the front office is a little disconnected and not hyper aware of what's happening in the back office. They can have a flow station up, but if a provider gets called out, something unique happens, maybe they aren't aware of what's happening on that side. And there's some challenges making sure patients in the lobby have some sort of expectation as to their wait. What we found is that when patients don't have their expectations managed, they tend to get frustrated even if their wait time isn't even longer. If you're communicated to and it's explained what your wait time is going to be, then that's a little clearer and a little better experience than just wondering, when is somebody going to come and get me? There's also a burden then that's placed on the clinical support staff, the medical assistants especially, to say, hey, you need to also keep the people in the lobby updated. Sometimes that's a long walk. And so those burdens can be, it can be challenging to make sure that actually happens. This is the outcome of some of these challenges and what we've been building to help address it. So it's a view that happens, that is available in the lobby. It shows by provider how many patients are waiting for that provider, the provider's picture, and then the status of the provider, if they're running on time, if they're delayed, which is automatically calculated. It'll alternate between this view and some patient education that you can define. So you can add some slides to show the patients while they're in the lobby and give them some education about services that you offer, about providers that perhaps are new to your organization, as well as sharing some information about anything that you want from a health education perspective. Some of the outcomes here, the goal is obviously to manage patient expectations based on reality, based on what's actually happening. To have this installed, first off, it's just a television with Ethernet that's in, the appropriate areas from a hardware perspective. And then second, if you don't have an EHR integration, that's something that is required for this, either an EHR integration or manually inputting patient data into the system. Jumping forward, we've done a lot of work this quarter around alerts. And so for those of you that were on our last 2 quarterly updates, we've talked about the options now to have pull cords in the restrooms, to have buttons under desks as duress buttons, as well as more traditional panic buttons that can just go on a wall. Part of the reason that we're being asked to incorporate this is there's often a lot of different systems for those alerts. And so staff have to monitor different dashboards or different lights. They have to listen for different sounds that are coming from various parts of the clinic to try to figure out, hey, what is being requested right now? Sometimes it's not really clear where an alert's coming from. So you may hear, oh, I know that's, a patient restroom somewhere. And if you're in a large facility, you may have to wander the halls looking for that restroom that is alerting. Oftentimes those systems can't really be customized. If you want to customize it, then it's a matter of starting to rip out drywall and adjust workflows because everything's hardwired. On the SyncTimes side, we started trying to address that, and what that looked like was a room on the flow station to indicate what was happening for perhaps a restroom or a lobby room, to only show if a specific icon or if a pull cord was pulled. So in the past, it was really, we're taking up a lot of space on the flow station for something that really didn't require a whole lot of space and only happened, once in a blue moon, but was very important when it did happen. So there's a couple of enhancements that we have related to this alerting functionality. First, there's an option in the rooms admin console to hide a room on the flow stations. And again, this is really going to be for your restrooms with pull cords, for lobbies that maybe have emergency buttons and those types of locations. If you have a room that's set up like that, and as an example, someone pulls a pull cord, then you're going to see the icon shown up here on the top right of the flow stations. And that'll show on any flow station for that site. So for the grouping of departments that make up that site. And so that's where you'll see the notifications for that specific room if the room is hidden. You also have the option now that if you're in one of those rooms and say you need to call somebody to that room, then you can manually search the room and then activate an action and then select the action. This will typically have a dual verify. So this is an option just from a pure software side to add an action and say, I have a code blue in a lobby, I have a security need, or potentially things like I need janitorial staff, I need a medical assistant to come up and help answer a question at the front desk. So there's a lot of workflows people are using this for, but those are just some of the ideas to get the thoughts percolating there. Some of the outcomes here we're looking for on alerting is really to take the whole expanded team, so not just provider medical assistants, but the expanded team, registration, security, integrated teams, management, and kind of get them into one communication system for patient needs. And so not having as much different silos in that way. Next, we want to make sure that we're automating, as many of the alerts as we can and letting people just really subscribe in one place to say, I want to be alerted for a code blue. We want an overhead page. If there is a code blue, I want a desktop notification if security is needed or smartwatches. So there's, that alerts engine is really powerful. And all of these things tie into that alerts engine. And then the last item here is, as far as outcomes, is as much as possible, we want to get that configuration out of hardware and into software. As you guys are aware, your workflows change fairly regularly, especially as we think about the last 4 years and global pandemic. Workflows change a lot. And if you have to change hardware every time any one of those alerts needs to be adjusted, then that's costly, that's challenging. If we can make that configuration relatively simple in software, then that's going to just reduce the overall complexity and allow you guys to be very dynamic in your workflows and adjusting things as they come up. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about an option related to standardization of care. A lot of this comes from the idea of having really clear guidelines and clear training for consistent workflows. Often what we find is that staff memory and training become the driving factors for remembering those, which can lead to some inconsistency. We want to talk about just one item that is specific to that, and that is on the actions. So on your icons, there's now an option to include a checklist under that. At this point, this is not required. And so we don't anticipate this will be a required functionality. If you want to just leave it really basic as is, it's totally okay. But there's two main purposes for this. First is being able to look at what is pending for a specific icon. So say patient intake, you can say there are specific items that are needed in order to carry out a patient intake, and have that as a reminder for staff so that they can just double check, did I finish everything that I needed to here? So the outcomes here, staff can see steps for each icon. We're also pulling in custom data from EHRs and population health tools. We're in a beta process on this right now, and showing that in these checklists. So as an example, if you have an open care gap, a quality measure that you're focused on, and that patient is due for that quality measure, then we can pull in the specifics of that quality measure and display them on this checklist. So staff, as they're going into the room, they can see, oh, I've got 2 out of 3 items that have been completed. I have a third quality measure that I need to check on for this patient. And we can automatically pull in that data to indicate from your pop health tool or from your EHR what is pending on for those data sets. Obviously, requirements here is really coordinating with the SyncTimes team to add those checklists and just talk through the workflow implications. If we're talking about doing this through an integration, then there's coordination with those integration partners. So turn the time here. I think Ian's got a poll he's going to pull out.
Yeah, exciting. So some of you have heard of these because some of these were your ideas. All of our feature updates, or the majority of them, come from your feedback. Some of you are seeing these for the first time, and so we're interested in your feedback. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a second to respond to these, and don't worry, we're not going to share these results with the group here, but it's good for us to understand what your thoughts are and what your next steps could be for the features that we've just introduced. So we'll leave this up for just about a minute, and if you could just take a second to answer a few questions, that would be very helpful.
Ian, I'm shocked 100% on the light turkey meat. Sounds like you're in the minority.
I am blown away. I think we need to do a repoll. We'll try it again next time. We've got some answers coming in now. Appreciate it. Yeah, we'll leave it open for probably another 20 to 30 seconds or so. I know there's some open-ended questions on there that you might be taking some time on. And we'll do about 2 more of these, and so just be aware of that. It looks like we do have, let's see. Okay. We've got a direct chat about that last one. Alan saying that is an awesome feature. So that's it's good to hear. Cool. All right, let's just give about 10 more seconds on this, and then we'll close it. If I didn't give you enough time, feel free just to reach out to me directly and share any questions or comments that you have.
Excellent. Well, I'll move forward. I think you're free to leave the poll open if you'd like, Ian.
Cool. I'll close that down in just a couple seconds, but go ahead.
Great. Awesome. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about communication with integrated teams. The goal here being that there's a lot of staff that are covering multiple departments. So maybe you have your medical assistants, your providers that just have their set, 3 to 5 exam rooms that they're focused on. Then you have other people, integrated behavioral health, janitorial services, care coordinators, et cetera, that are managing, an entire clinic or an entire department and are looking for specific tasks that may be pending in those departments or for a group of providers. And so what we're adding here is we've had this option to respond to the actions from the flow station. And this is just so that if you have say an MA is needed here, and say there's an MA that's managing multiple departments, which might be a little unique, but say there's a nurse managing multiple departments, they can reply and say, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And that's what that 5 indicates. There's also now an option to do that via text message. So if I have a notification that's set to send me a text message, we'll say, as an example, I'm an integrated behavioral health provider, and I get a text that says I'm needed in exam 4. I now have the option to reply and to say yes, no, 5, 10, or 15. 5, 10, or 15, meaning 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes. So here in this example, I said 5. Response in exam 4 was set to 5. And then the care teams, so the medical teams, can see here 5 minutes is what I've responded. If multiple people respond, then kind of the most positive one comes to the front, meaning if 3 people say no and then 1 person says yes, you can see the one that said yes in the front. And then if you hover on them, you can see who actually responded to those icons. The goal here being to quickly and easily communicate, if you're managing a whole clinic and doing the integrated behavioral health for, 10 or 12 providers, to be able to quickly say, yeah, I'm available, or no, I'm not. Next, related to this, there's an option now to disable an icon temporarily. The purpose here would be to say, I am not available. We have a staff member that is not available to respond. And so that is currently in the department's configuration. You have this option to disable an action. So here we're disabling the nurse needed action. And then on the flow stations and on the tablets, that icon will be grayed out. What that communicates is that this service is not available. This staff is not available right now. So thinking about staff that maybe, they work 9 to 5, and then there's, an option to indicate that they're not available or they got pulled into an appointment, then that's what this is for. At this point, this is driven from the admin console. If we have interest in this being more of a front-end managed feature, the plan is to build this in so that individual users can manage this. So maybe a team lead for your integrated behavioral health or a lead for your janitorial staff can have that icon managed from their side, whether that icon is available or not. So the outcome here being staff can just quickly see what shared services are available on a tablet in an exam room or from the flow station. I'm going to give a quick update on the locate side. We had feedback early on about hoping to get a little bit more functionality on the beacons, being able to see the battery life, hopefully reduce the size, make charging a little bit easier. As far as availability on this, we are just now getting shipments. We are still fighting the chip shortage. And so some of the chips that we would like to that we need to make these are not widely available yet. We're still having to work pretty hard to even find some enough that are available to keep up with our demand. So we aren't going to be rolling these out to existing clinics, but we're going to have these available for new clinics. Just as far as what that looks like, I have one here in my hand, and then I just showed a picture. This is the 3D rendering of it. When you click on the button in the middle, then it shows a green, yellow, or red battery life indicator to indicate your status. The battery life on these is about a month, so it'll be green for about a week, yellow for about 2 weeks, and then red for about a week before it's dead. The training that we've given has been to just plan on charging these on a weekly basis, just to make it relatively simple from a habit perspective. And so that's going to be consistent. That's the only update on the locate side. Next, we want to talk about Illuminate. So this is reporting. This is giving data in with regards to your health center operations. And helping you to benchmark your data. Currently, a lot of times what we have as health center leaders is data about our operations, but we don't have a lot of context about how do our operations compare in the grand scheme of the FQHC community in our state, et cetera. And so this right now is something that we have not done, that we have been looking forward to doing for a long time. And so starting last quarter, we created some of the functionality for some benchmarking availability. And we invited 3 of our really data-driven organizations to beta test this and to provide feedback. We got very positive feedback. There's a lot of excitement about this. And so now we're releasing this as generally available. I'll talk about this at the end, but the requirement here, if you would like to adopt this, is just that we need a document that explains that we are giving you access to other health centers' anonymized data, and vice versa, that we're sharing your anonymized data if you choose to be a part of this benchmarking group. If you don't choose to be a part, then you won't have access to anybody else's data, and they won't be able to see your anonymized data. So first, I just want to show how this will be accessed. This is the new dropdown. It says benchmark. Right now, if you're not one of those beta testers, then when you select this, it's not going to give you the option to show any other benchmark groups or organizations. The way we've created this is that on the top, there's a benchmark group called All, and that will show all other health centers in the SyncTimes community. And so it'll let you look at your data with the other health centers side by side. And so typically that would look like you'd select all, and then initially you could say, I just want to view our orgs side by side for things like visits per patient work hour and patient flow. There's also, you can drill down from there and view at a department level or at a site level. So the first benchmark group is All. You also have the option, if you're in a state and you know the other health centers on the SyncTime system, and we coordinate and say, yep, we want to have specific to our state, we want to have a benchmarking group because we're in the same funding environment, we're a little more comparable from a workflow perspective, then you have the option to create a state level or in a best practices group and have that data shared just within that specific group so that you can compare and know among a specific set of peers how that data is comparing side by side. Tied to this, there's also a new report, and you'll see it labeled Benchmarking Beta, where you get your normal SyncTimes reports. This report includes really just some key metrics, and then it allows you to, again, pull in some benchmark organizations or not, or just view your data, and at a department, site, org, or staff level, start to look at some quartile information. And so being able to look at all of your providers, their cycle times, and breaking them down by quartile to kind of get a vision for where our top quartile performers, where our bottom quartile performers, and what do those breakdowns look like for our organization or in the context of a larger population. So again, requirements here, it's an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding from the health center, indicating that you're comfortable with us sharing your anonymized data, which will not be tied. Basically, we've scrubbed any identifiers out of it in exchange for being able to view your data in the context of other health centers' anonymized data. Great. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about room history. One of the challenges that we've heard is SyncTimes on the Flow Station has a really clear view of what's happening right now in an exam room. So you can look at it and just very clearly see what's happening now, what's needed, how long has a patient been alone, that type of information. What we haven't always done is had a great set of information or way to communicate clearly what has happened leading up to the present moment in this room. If you look at a flow station now, you're going to see a little bar graph outside of each room. Selecting that bar graph is going to show the visits, including the current visit, that have happened. So if you're looking at a current visit, it'll show a timeline of when the patient was roomed, which icons have been added and for how long, as well as which staff members have been in the room, again, leading up to the present moment. The goal here is that you can get feedback and you can know what has happened leading up to right now. If we have a patient waiting for 3 things and they've been alone for 20 minutes, you can get a feel for what has happened leading up to that current moment. Turn it to Ian. I think we've got another poll coming here for feedback.
Yeah, another quick poll. If you wouldn't mind just answering these questions really quickly, and interested in your feedback. And also, I'm not a part of all of the product update initial calls where we get your ideas, but I know this last one that Alan just shared was the idea of Michelle, who's on this call. So shout out to Michelle, who gave us the idea for where to relocate that live patient history report. So got some answers coming in now. I'll leave that open for about 30 more seconds, and then we'll continue from there.
Michelle's been I just glanced yesterday at how often that feature has been used. And Michelle, I think in the last 30 days has used that about 75 times was the count. So yeah, again, shout out to Michelle.
Awesome. Cool. 20 more seconds and we'll continue with the last segment of product updates for this quarter. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Great. So last segment here is talking about the roadmap, talking about what we're building and what we're looking forward to. Again, we talk about this in terms of short term, meaning in Q1, what are we looking at releasing? And then over the course of the next year, what are some things that are on our roadmap? So short term, I first want to talk a little bit about expanded patient satisfaction surveys. So at this point, a lot of the data that you get out of SyncTimes is highly quantitative. It's the number of minutes that a patient spends alone in a room. It's the number of total cycle minutes. It's how many patients per provider hour are we seeing, and then some very, very basic patient experience data about happy or not from a survey. What we're adding is the ability to have more in-depth patient satisfaction surveys that start on the tablet with a QR code and then patients finish on their phone on a mobile device. This is just an example of what that will look like. And so if you want on your screen, feel free to scan this QR code. This would be white labeled, so we'd be showing your logo in the corner, and then you can update the questions as well as the explanations here, just to be consistent with what your expectations are. The discussions, this has been widely requested over the last year. The discussions have been about things from knowing a little bit more about the registration to actually using this for some of your compliance, patient satisfaction information, as well as just to get a feel for how patients are feeling the day when they leave their appointment, rather than having to wait 3 weeks or a month to have typical patient satisfaction survey sent back. I mentioned that part of the goal here is to tie the quantitative data of SyncTimes to really qualitative feedback from the patients. This QR code will be tied to that patient visit. And so when a patient scans this, it's tied to their visit. And so we will know who is actually responding to that QR code and let you actually address that. If there's a concern, you'll know who you need to reach out to address that. This quarter, the goal here is to beta test this, but we're really excited about the prospect of having a lot of this data and tying, again, that quantitative data with the feedback that patients give us through simple multiple choice and short response questions. Next item here is related to population health integrations for care gaps for quality measures. One of the challenges that we've identified in our conversations with you, as well as with the population health organizations. The challenge has been shared that the population health tools often provide some really interesting, useful data that would be great to use before a visit. But either we don't really get to the huddle reports before the visit, or we talk about it in the morning, and then by the time the patient arrives and the whole day has been crazy, that we've kind of forgotten about it at the point of care. And so what we're doing here is when a patient is checked in, we are pulling from a population health tool to know what the open care gaps are for that patient, and then working with you guys to map that to a specific icon or to a checklist on an open care gaps icon. We can show really as much or as little as you guys want. I do think there's value in prioritizing these, so it may not be, sometimes those huddle reports also have 30 things on them for a patient, and that just becomes really overwhelming. So it might be valuable to say, we're just going to target 1 or 2 things and make those our priorities. Today, as far as status on this, we're actively building with I2I, and so we have a partnership with I2I, and we're building this out with them. But overall, we're working on building this out with other providers as well. So if you have another pop health tool, or if you're working with I2I, we'd love to connect with you and to get that process started. Obviously, the requirement here is integrations. We're going to need to communicate and coordinate with your team as well as those other partner organizations that you have. Okay, next we're going to talk a little bit appointment statuses. One of the challenges that we've heard is that there aren't consistent reports in some EHRs on no-shows, on whether or not patient appointments have been confirmed. And so this is something we're pulling that data in already from most of your EHRs. And so we're just creating some reporting to show no-shows and then really driving that based on, did we confirm the appointment, to see if we confirm an appointment, what's the probability increase that a patient actually shows up, starting to drill in and help a little bit on that no-show side. Skipping down as a long-term goal related to that, we would like to build a no-shows likely work list. So patients that are likely to no-show based on their past history, they've no-showed in the past, and having a work list that can be worked to address those and help with additional confirmation there. Additionally, we want to look at appointment utilization. This is a little bit, there's some technical challenges related to appointment utilization just because of the availability of data in an HL7 interface. So that's something that we're going to be tackling over the course of the next year. It's not something that's in this quarter, but thinking about we have 3 open slots per hour in an 8-hour day, so 24 open slots. How many of those are scheduled? From there, how many are confirmed, and how many actually arrive and are seen for their visit? That's kind of the data set that we're starting to dig in on. If you're interested in those data sets in particular, please include it in the poll that Ian's going to mention. We'd love to just kind of broaden our discovery that we're doing on that data set. The other long-term item here over the course of the next 12 months, I think it's around Q2 is what we're estimating, is starting to have just a really, really, really basic kiosk check-in option in the SyncTimes system. This would indicate first off, that a patient has arrived. It would update the status in your EHR, with the idea being that 2 things. Sometimes patients arrive and then it takes them a long time to get through the registration line. And at that point, it looks like they're late for their appointment. Medical assistants and providers can get frustrated by that. And so having a way for them to indicate right when they arrive, yep, I'm here, I have arrived, via a really simple kiosk that asks for information, date of birth, name, and appointment time. And then either can check them in if there's nothing needed from the patient, or can route them to a registration team member. Initially, you've heard me say a couple of times today that Athena Health, the API is kind of where we're starting with some of these. That is the case here, just because they have a very standardized API to work with, and the organization that is pushing this is on Athena Health currently. So I'd anticipate this is going to be Athena Health is where we're starting with this, but it is something we're looking to expand more into. As far as really more broad kiosk or check-in, self-check-in processes, I don't anticipate over the course of the next year and probably just over long term on our roadmap that that's going to be something we're really tackling. There's a lot of solutions that focus a lot on the check-in process, a lot on getting all the patient's documentation paperwork updated, and so that's probably out of scope for us. But there's obviously a lot of solutions that you can work with. We'd be thrilled to help with a partnership with one of those as well.
Hey, question on this specific topic, Alan, from Daniela. Does that have a distance of how far away you can check in for the
Yeah.
kiosks?
Good question. Initially, Daniela, we're thinking this is actually a physical device in the lobby. So that's the initial thought here. We've talked about potentially having some communication to the patient. If we do that, then we would need to think about, like you're saying, either geofencing to say, you have to be you have to be within a block or two of the facility. The other thought that we've had is kind of having a dynamic QR code where the patient can come in and they can scan that on their phone to indicate, I've arrived, with the goal being get rid of separate tablets. Often it's easier for people just to use their phone than to check in from a separate device. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. We would likely not initially have it be something that a patient's just sending a text message, unless there's a way that we can validate that the patient's actually arrived, at least in the parking lot. Great. Looks like it was Estella pretending to be Daniela. So. Great. And Joyce, TCC is actually the organization that we're talking to with this. So I think Trinity, obviously your health applications team is also working on that. So that posting the QR code idea is one that we've discussed. I think in your facility, there were some questions around cell coverage in the lobby. That was a concern. So, but probably worth having a conversation. Trinity, Kim, Shaughnessy, Todd, Kyle, and Ryan are all kind of up to speed on the current status there. I'm going to pass it over to Ian here. I know we've got a closing poll here. And the goal here is just really want to get your feedback. There's also a number of these things where we need to talk if we're going to implement it. We want to be able to consult with you guys on how we're adopting these features and make sure that if you're interested in one of these things, that we're engaged with you to help make sure it's successful. As always, really exciting, grateful for the partnerships, grateful for each of you for joining today. We have a lot of fun things coming up, a lot of really exciting things that we're building, and that's thanks to you, thanks to your feedback and the work that we're able to do together. So if you don't mind, just feel free to fill out that poll, and then don't hesitate